You got Trump announcing a ceasefire, then ranting that Israel and Iran don't actually know what the hell they're doing, and a new US intel leak is suggesting that Iran's nuclear sites weren't actually destroyed. You've also got Ariana Grande Trump impeachment drama. RFK's new anti-vax CDC panel is now focused on a debunked autism conspiracy. Nearly every state could be forced to follow their lead, and so now states, insurers, and doctors are scrambling to build a replacement. And one of the most iconic players in Smash Bros just destroyed his own career because he got caught on camera drunkenly harassing women. You're getting all of that and much more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, starting with this. Israel and Iran have fully agreed to a complete and total ceasefire, but also Israel and Iran are two countries that have no idea what the fuck they're doing. Those are two statements that you got from President Trump himself in less than 24 hours. And so let's talk about what the hell is actually happening, because you had Trump announcing the ceasefire less than 48 hours after he dropped over a dozen 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs on Iran's most important nuclear facility and attacked two other sites with precision-guided weapons. With that, then leading to Iran retaliating with an attack on the largest American military base in the Middle East, which left the whole world fearing that this was just gonna blow up. But now, while ultimately it's still too early to tell, as of recording at least, it looks like we may have avoided the worst. Because to go back, you had Trump announcing the ceasefire on Truth Social at around 6 p.m. DC time yesterday. But we also explained that it wouldn't actually take effect until roughly 6 hours later, and it laid out a very unclear timeline of how exactly it would all unfold, and ultimately claiming that the war would be officially ended within 24 hours. With them also adding there, this is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. But immediately, you saw doubts, right? Neither Israel or Iran immediately came out and confirmed the ceasefire at first. And in fact, shortly after the ceasefire announcement, you had the IDF issuing an evacuation warning for several parts of Tehran. And then, overnight, according to the people that lived there, the city got hit by what's been described as the most intense and sustained airstrike since the conflict began. With also the IDF saying that it had destroyed missile launchers in western Iran, and Iranian media saying that 9 were killed in the north of the country, and that reportedly included a nuclear scientist who was staying at his parents' place. A death that notably brought the total number of scientists Israel has killed, including chemists, physicists, and engineers, to at least 14. And then overall, you had Iran's health ministry saying today that the Israeli attack since the war began has killed 606 people and wounded more than 5,000. Right? And so with all that, shortly after Trump's ceasefire announcement, you had the Iranian foreign minister writing on X, as of now, there is no agreement on any ceasefire or cessation of military operations, but then also say, however, provided that the Israeli regime stops its illegal aggression against the Iranian people no later than 4 a.m. Tehran time, we have no intention to continue our response afterwards. Right? And with that, you had Iran also keeping up its attacks against Israel, with them reportedly launching 6 barrages of ballistic missiles at Israel and killing at least 4 people. Deaths that reportedly brought the total number killed in Israel to 28, along with another roughly 1,300 people affected, according to Israel's emergency services, most of whom were lightly wounded or being treated for anxiety. And soon enough, you had the Israeli government confirming that it had agreed to the ceasefire brokered by the Trump administration. But then the Israeli military soon said they had detected another barrage of missiles from Iran after the ceasefire was meant to have gone into effect. Right? And specifically, they said that the ceasefire was set for 7 o'clock in the morning, but that Iran launched 1 missile at Israeli territory at 7:06 and 2 more at 10:25, and saying that these missiles were either intercepted or fell in open areas and caused neither casualties nor damage. But still, you had the Israeli defense minister announcing that he had instructed the IDF to continue high-intensity operations targeting regime assets and terror infrastructure in Tehran in light of Iran's blatant violation of the ceasefire declared by the President of the United States. Iran, however, they denied violating the ceasefire and actually accused Israel of doing the same. And then Trump, for his part, this morning, he blamed both sides.
Do you believe that Iran is still committed to peace?
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too.
Are you questioning if Israel is committed?
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I'd never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. When I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because of one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. We basically have 2 countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
Right, and then shortly after that, you had Trump warning Israel on social media like an angry dad, posting, Israel, do not drop those bombs. If you do, it is a major violation. Bring your pilots home now. But then, just around 40 minutes later, he happily claimed that Israel wasn't going to attack Iran and added, all planes will turn around and head home while doing a friendly plane wave to Iran. Nobody will be hurt. The ceasefire is in effect. And reportedly, what happened in between those 2 posts is that Trump called Netanyahu and asked him not to attack. And then there, Netanyahu reportedly told Trump that he was actually unable to cancel the attack because Israel needed to respond to Iran's violation in some way. Though then it's also claimed that it was decided to significantly scale back the strike, and they canceled attacks on a large number of targets and instead hit just one radar system outside of Tehran. With the office of the Israeli Prime Minister saying in a statement, pursuant to the conversation between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, Israel has refrained from additional attacks. And so with all that, at least for now, it seems like both sides are actually interested in this ceasefire holding, and everyone's going to try and turn it into a victory lap. Which is actually a reason that this ceasefire may have a chance of succeeding. With, for example, one expert telling the New York Times, the United States can say it has set back Iran's nuclear program, Israel can say it has weakened Iran, a regional adversary, and Iran can say it has survived and pushed back against much stronger military powers. At that point, you had Iran's Supreme National Security Council saying it was imposing a ceasefire on Israel by striking a US base in Qatar and other targets, with them then adding that it had forced the enemy to regret and accept defeat and unilaterally stop its aggression. And then Israel, it's been seen as so much of a win that it's actually leading to a surge in Netanyahu's popularity. So much so that he's actually thinking about calling snap elections. Here in the States, you've had Trump reposting his own praise, including a call by Charlie Kirk that he should get a Nobel Peace Prize. And then beyond just saying that he has set back Iran's nuclear program, he's claiming to have completely destroyed it and saying in one post, Iran will never rebuild their nuclear facilities. Though very notably, a leaked US intelligence assessment reportedly says that the nuclear sites aren't even close to being totally destroyed. And in fact, the reported leak said that they likely only set Iran's nuclear program back by a few months. Though there you had White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying this alleged assessment is flat out wrong and was leaked by an anonymous low-level loser. But whatever the case may be, you have Iran's nuclear chief saying the country will restore its nuclear program, which, to be clear, is not a nuclear weapons program. Because Iran has for decades been described as being close to having a weapon, but no US intelligence has actually suggested it was pursuing one. And in fact, even after more than a week of Israeli strikes on Iran, senior intelligence officials said that a 2003 religious ruling by the country's supreme leader prohibiting the development of nuclear weapons was still held. And that is, they also said that the US entering the war and striking its most secure nuclear facility would actually make Iran more likely to want to build one, or with them potentially seeing it as the only way to prevent future attacks or to ensure the country's survival. So while Trump is celebrating getting rid of that perceived Iranian nuclear threat, you have many saying he may have actually just created it. For now, we're seeing that even the idea that Iran's facilities were not completely obliterated as he claimed, that appears to be enough to send Trump on a tirade against the so-called fake news media.
Iran will never rebuild its nuclear. From there, absolutely not. That place is under rock. That place is demolished. But when I see CNN all night long, they're trying to say, well, maybe it wasn't really as demolished as we thought. It was demolished. You take a look at the pinpricks and you see that place is gone. And I will say, I think CNN ought to apologize to the pilots of the B-2s. I think that MSDNC ought to apologize. I think these guys really, these networks and these cable networks are real losers.
But then also, separate from that, you have people saying that even if Trump's decision to attack Iran has actually worked as he intended, that doesn't change the fact that it may have also been illegal. Because like we talked about yesterday, several Democrats and even a Republican have argued that it was unconstitutional since Congress didn't give the okay. With, for example, Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez calling Trump's actions absolutely and clearly grounds for impeachment. Right in there, you actually had Trump responding today with yet another post on Truth Social calling her stupid and one of the dumbest people in Congress, and then continuing on an insult-filled rant. But in any case, you now today have Representative Al Green from Texas saying that he'll actually be introducing articles of impeachment against Trump and saying in a statement, President Trump has not only violated his oath of office, he has also disregarded the separation of powers necessary to maintain the independence of our three branches of government. But just this afternoon, the House overwhelmingly voted to reject that impeachment attempt, 344 to 79, with a large majority of Democrats joining Republicans to table the measure. But hey, as far as what happens next, here's what I'll say, and it's specifically regarding Iran and Israel. Hopefully, the ceasefire works. Hopefully, stuff calms down and people aren't getting killed. But whether the ceasefire actually holds, or it's just a pause, or it leads to some other situation, that remains to be seen, and we'll have to keep our eyes on it. But then also with this, I'll say, we're seeing this whole other controversy brewing around calls for Trump's impeachment because Ariana Grande, she just weighed in on it, slammed Trump, and that has now morphed into this national news story about body shaming. Right? And that, because over the weekend, Ariana posted a few messages critical of Trump on social media, including AOC's call to impeach him. You know, all of that, it's not out of character for Ariana, right? She posts about politics pretty frequently, and she got a lot of applause from her fans for those posts. But this time, those posts, they caught the attention of Megyn Kelly, who lashed out at Ariana on her SiriusXM show yesterday.
I think that Ariana Grande needs to put more thought into how to add 1/2 an ounce of fat back onto her body than she does thinking about President Trump being impeached. Obviously, she is in the middle of a crisis. I'm sorry, but this woman looks ill. Someone needs to do an intervention to help her. I'm not saying this to be snarky. I genuinely think someone needs to help this woman.
With Meghan then also questioning why anyone should actually listen to Ariana's political opinions, since she's a singer and an actress, and she used clips from her time on the show Victorious to discredit her.
And the reason she's qualified to make this conclusion is because of the segments she did for years on Nickelodeon as follows.
Sometimes I wonder if you can get juice from a potato.
Right in there, you might recognize that clip from the Quiet on Set documentary that explored incredibly disturbing abuse allegations behind the scenes at Nickelodeon. With Meghan then also sharing a scene where Ariana dumped water on herself and then saying,
She was exploited as a young person. It's not nice. It's actually quite sad. But now she's decided to take that troubled youth and turn it around to make constitutional judgments about our president. There's a lot that went on, I think, on that Nickelodeon set that's never been fully threshed out. And I think Ariana Grande should work on her own well-being and keep her constitutional thoughts to herself.
But with then all of that leading to outlets like the Daily Beast calling Meghan's tirade gross, as well as at others online saying it was completely out of line to go after Ariana's body, saying it's disgusting that Megyn Kelly is faking being concerned about her past when she's trying to weaponize it against her. And then, as far as Grande herself, she hasn't responded yet. Though it also really wouldn't be surprising if she just didn't respond, because, this is something that a lot of people have discussed for years. More recently, the discourse around it was inescapable during the Wicked press tour when, people were sharing photos and videos of her and speculating if she had an eating disorder. All of which then led to her addressing some of it during an interview back in December where she was asked about the pressures and beauty standards that exist for women, and she actually got very emotional.
My goodness.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna.
It's okay.
I've been kind of doing this in front of the public and kind of been, a specimen in a petri dish really since I was 16 or 17. It's something that is uncomfortable no matter what scale you're experiencing it on. Even if you go to Thanksgiving dinner and someone's granny says, "Oh my God, you look skinnier, what happened?" Or "You look heavier, what happened?" It's like, that is something that is uncomfortable and horrible. And I think in today's society, there's a comfortability that we shouldn't have at all. Commenting on others' looks, appearance, what they think is going on behind the scenes, or health, or how they present themselves.
And then I've got more news for you in just a minute. But first, if you're anything like me, you've also procrastinated and put off a business or a project idea that's just been chilling in your brain, half-baked and ignored for way too long. But hey, make this the month that you finally make that side hustle or passion project a reality. For me, it was my book club. I'd put it off for forever. And I kid you not, right? DeFranco Book Club, it went from someday to launched in under an hour with today's sponsor, Squarespace. Because they make it crazy easy to build a site, whether you just want to talk about things, showcase things, or you want to start selling content, courses, physical or digital products. Whatever you've got in mind, you can do. And that even includes charging a one-time fee, offering a subscription, or both, right? Done and done. And you can make it all look fantastic, right? You can utilize stunning templates that make it look like you hired a designer. And you can use their Fluid Engine editor that lets you drag, drop, and customize. No coding, no stress, no excuses. And, we use Squarespace for a lot of things. My team uses Squarespace for our daily tip newsletter, where tens of thousands of you get your PDS fix in your inbox every weekday. Right? Polls, giveaways, PDS show notes, they're all run through Squarespace. Just like clockwork, another daily dip issue went out this morning, and your project vision, it could be next. All you gotta do is take that first step today with a free trial over at squarespace.com/Phil, or hey, just scan that QR code and make today launch day. Just remember that when it's ready to go, use code Phil to get 10% off and let them know we sent you. But then shifting gears from that to a very different kind of news, this is big in the gaming and streaming space. One of the most dominant and famous players of the Super Smash Melee community, Mango, he just nuked his entire career after doing this on stream.
See, we're not drunk, guys. Yeah, we're not drunk. But Mango, on the other hand. No. He's humping toes. No.
End the stream. End it.
End the stream, Mango says.
End the stream.
So that incident, it happened at a booze-fueled event put on by Ludwig's Mobile Moves, and it was meant to just kind of be a fun time for creators to get together, play the new Mario Kart, and give away the new Switch to fans. However, it didn't take long for chaos to ensue, especially from Mango. Right? Because as you saw in that clip, he was running around in his shorts, he was humping stuff left and right, and actually targeting Maya Higa wasn't the only time. He also did something similar to Cinna, who appeared clearly upset by it.
Mango, what are you doing?
Not that it appeared to help, he just kept doing it. Cinna even tried to ask someone to get Mango a water, and instead someone laughed that they gave him another beer instead.
Give Mango water. Look at this mother.
I gave him the beer.
And in both of these clips, you can clearly see that the women involved, they're just not happy about it or comfortable at all. And so quickly, you saw people bashing Mango for what he was doing and calling for something to be done. People saying things like, why can't male streamers behave like normal people and get that man-child away from them? That's so fucking weird. However, there was also a lot of people that were defending Mango by claiming that no one told him to stop. But there, you had people pushing back, saying that the women in the clips, they're clearly uncomfortable and they make it clear that what he was doing wasn't appreciated. You then also had people giving Extra Emily some flack for just laughing about it the whole time. Though there, in past controversies, she's mentioned that she laughs when she's uncomfortable to diffuse situations, and she hasn't responded about this situation specifically yet. Also, with this situation, you have people saying that Mango has a history of this, pointing to how he got banned in 2021 for humping a figurine on Twitch. Regarding what just happened, you had Mango seeming apologetic and tweeting a few times. First saying, hate waking up and seeing I was a drunk dumbass. I don't like using the drunk excuse because it's childish, but at the moment, I think everyone is as drunk as me, and that's not usually the case. However, everyone else being as drunk as you isn't an excuse to hump them while nearly naked, which led to responses like, even back in the day in my early 20s when I was plastered, I still asked women for consent before dancing with them or touching them. Didn't matter how wasted I was, I still knew better than to make women uncomfortable. With them then adding, alcohol doesn't magically make you a different person, it removes inhibitions and makes you feel like you can get away with things. Then also had Mango's other tweets touching on reevaluating his relationship with alcohol and apologizing, saying everyone has coddled me for so long and kind of looked the other way when it came to my drinking. Don't want anyone to feel bad for me / defend me. Sorry to everyone I've let down or hurt. I know it just looks like I'm trying to save face, but I genuinely feel so awful about it. All I've done is reflect on my life and realized I'm a broken human. Also, in this whole situation, there was a big question of, what was going to happen to his professional relationships. And there you had Ludwig saying,
I'm no longer inviting Mango to Mogul Moves events. Cause it's a privilege to go to an event, man. Like the whole point of an event is it's a fun thing to do, have a good ass time. And if somebody appearing jeopardizes somebody else having a good time, that just can't be a thing. Now I see a lot of dialogue on broader implications. I'm only worried about my team, my events, you know what I'm saying? I don't speak for the Melee community. I'm not championing any other action.
And when Ludwig, he said he doesn't speak for any other orgs or communities, it was clear that they were not happy as well. With you then also seeing Cloud9, which has sponsored Mango for over a decade, essentially forever in the esports world, ending their relationship with it. And in their post, which was pretty long, they made it clear that regardless of tenure or accomplishments, the behavior demonstrated is entirely unacceptable and directly conflicts with our organization's core values. And saying we maintain a zero tolerance stance against harassment or any other form of inappropriate conduct. And while you had many supporting that decision, you also had others pushing back, saying things like, could have at least offered some rehab or something. He's an alcoholic, support your teammates. And regardless of how much you help build a company up, they will turn their back on you for social media clout. And all of this is the situation might not be over because you have Mango himself thinking that other tournament series in the future are going to ban him as well. But with that, he also said that he has no one to blame but himself, and that, quote, I had it all and fucking tossed it in the trash can. And so, with all this, of course, I'd love to know everyone's thoughts and reactions to the news, but especially if you are in this streaming and gaming space and you're more familiar with the characters involved. What are your thoughts here? But the next step from that, we've got to talk about how the Supreme Court just ruled that the Trump administration can deport migrants to countries they've never been to, even if it puts them at risk of torture. With the High Court's conservative majority laying out a monumental decision on immigration. Right, in the specific case in question centered around the Trump administration's efforts to deport groups of migrants, particularly those charged with violent crimes, to third countries that they're not from and may have no connection to. And you had 4 individuals represented by immigrant rights groups filing a lawsuit against the administration in Boston, arguing that migrants subject to third country deportations were entitled to due process, claiming that they should be given adequate notice of their deportation and allowed the chance to raise objections if they were being sent to a country where they faced a risk of being harmed. Right, and back in April, U.S. District Judge Brian Murphy temporarily blocked the Trump administration from carrying out third country deportations without first allowing the deportees to raise fear-based claims that they would face persecution, torture, or death. In the area, the judge argued in his ruling that the Trump administration was likely violating the U.S. Constitution's due process protections. But then, a month later, Murphy ruling that the administration actually directly violated his order by attempting to deport a group of 8 men to South Sudan, which is a conflict-ridden country that most of them have never been to. With the judge saying that he found that the men had not been given proper notice or the ability to raise fear-based claims about what might happen to them in a country with a record of human rights abuses. And so as a result, the 8 men were diverted to an American military base in Djibouti while the appeals process played out. And then after the First Circuit Court of Appeals declined to put Murphy's ruling on hold, the administration asked the Supreme Court to intervene. And in their filings, lawyers for the administration argued that Murphy had infringed on the executive's authority over deportations, right, and saying the judge made the process too complicated by forcing officials officials to follow a treaty ratified by Congress that prevents the government from sending people to countries where they might be tortured. But the lawyers then further alleging that Murphy had undermined the government's ability to remove some of the worst illegal aliens. But then on the other side, you had lawyers for the immigrants hitting back at that, arguing that many of the migrants targeted under this policy haven't been convicted of crimes and initially entered the US legally, with them accusing the administration of repeatedly trying to deport people, quote, as a punitive measure to some of the most dangerous places on the planet and with only hours' notice, right? And then further claiming that regardless of potential criminal status, migrants should still be given due process rights, right? And they noted that a lawyer for the Trump administration had actually openly acknowledged that due process rights are required for third country removals during oral arguments in a separate case before the Supreme Court back in March. And that last point, it's super notable because the High Court has also previously restrained the Trump administration in other deportation cases and criticized officials for failing to ensure due process protections for some migrants. But apparently, they felt that those rights applied differently in this case. And the reason I say apparently is because we literally do not know the logic behind their decision. The majority did not provide any reasoning in their order. But that is, on the other side, you had the court's 3 liberal justices writing a lengthy and absolutely scathing dissent, accusing the majority of ignoring a federal law that requires due process, with Justice Sonia Sotomayor implying that the majority was contradicting past orders it had made, emphasizing due process rights for migrants, arguing that this decision was as incomprehensible as it is inexcusable. And then beyond that, Sotomayor also accused the conservative majority of rewarding lawlessness by blocking the lower court order that the Trump administration had openly defied, and adding, the government has made clear in word and deed that it feels itself unconstrained by law, free to deport anyone anywhere without notice or an opportunity to be heard. The episodes of non-compliance in this very case illustrate the risks. But they're then going on to say that even if a higher court ultimately overturns a lower court ruling, the government is still required to obey them until that happens. Writing, that principle is a bedrock of the rule of law. The government's misconduct threatens it to its core. And then further accusing the conservatives of setting a horrible precedent by essentially rewarding the Trump administration for disobeying a direct court order, arguing, each time this court rewards non-compliance with discretionary relief, it further erodes respect for courts and for the rule of law. Now, with all that said, as far as what happens next, following the Supreme Court's ruling yesterday, you had Murphy issuing an order saying that the 8 migrants being held in Djibouti were protected from immediate removal under a separate ruling that he had previously issued. But really, regardless, it appears that the Trump administration has now been given a blank check to move forward with deporting migrants to countries they have no connection to. And with that, you had the Department of Homeland Security applauding the ruling as a victory on social media, writing, fire up the deportation planes. And that, as you had DHS Secretary Kristi Noem sharing a screenshot of the decision with a gif of Trump doing a celebratory dance. But then next up today, do you remember how RFK Jr. fired the CDC's entire vaccine advisory panel and then replaced them with what many have described as anti-vaxxers? Well, they're now getting to work and it ain't pretty. There's a new panel set to hold its first meeting Wednesday and Thursday, but instead of following the old draft agenda that had policy discussions on stuff like COVID vaccines, it's now scheduled to have a discussion and vote on thimerosal, which is a preservative used in a small fraction of flu vaccines to prevent fungal or bacterial growth. Because although studies have repeatedly confirmed that it is safe in the low doses given in vaccines and does not cause autism, RFK Jr., he wrote a whole book a decade ago claiming the opposite.
It is the most potent neurotoxin that is not radioactive. Why would we? It's 30 times as neurotoxic as lead. Why would we put that in a child or a pregnant woman if we didn't have to?
Right, and where he goes wrong is in assuming that because thimerosal contains mercury, it is necessarily dangerous. Because as many have pointed out, there are actually 2 kinds of mercury. There is ethyl mercury, the scary kind, ooh, scary, and then methyl mercury, which the human body clears much faster. In thimerosal, it contains methyl mercury. And in fact, the CDC just today published a very nicely timed report reviewing the evidence of thimerosal in vaccines and concluded that there is no link between it and autism. But instead of heeding that report's findings, it appears that RFK's new CDC panel is going to listen to a presentation Thursday by Lynn Redwood, the former president of RFK's anti-vax group Children's Health Defense, previously known as the World Mercury Project, which is really unusual because, as reports have noted, presenters typically come from the panel's working groups and have spent months gathering and discussing evidence on a given topic. And then also unusual is the fact that, according to the Vaccine Integrity Project, Redwood's presentation hasn't actually been vetted by CDC subject matter experts. So you have that group saying these are clear signs that the true intent of the meeting is to sow distrust about the safety of vaccines. In that, it actually brings us to another piece of news we have to talk about from the Washington Post about how the Vaccine Integrity Project is fighting back against RFK. Because with this key advisory panel just now going rogue, you have experts saying that they can no longer rely on federal authorities to recommend vaccines, which is traditionally a key step in determining which ones get covered by insurance. So the project, which is funded by an unrestricted gift from a philanthropic foundation, is leading an effort to set up an alternative parallel vaccine system apart from the federal government in the private sector. And there, they would loop in professional medical associations, pharmacists, state health officials, insurance companies, and vaccine manufacturers. With all this, this, reportedly including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Family Physicians, the American Pharmacists Association, and the National Foundation for Infectious Diseases. And while the plans are still in the works, what they're talking about reportedly includes ordering vaccines directly from manufacturers and giving greater weight to medical associations rather than the CDC. So hopefully, if all goes well, insurers will continue covering vaccines even if the federal government drops support for them. With saying one former industry executive saying, insurers are absolutely trying to find ways to cover services that are so widely understood as beneficial and proven. And adding, I wouldn't want to be the first insurer to start to decline coverage for what are clearly incredibly important and valuable public health interventions. But a big key thing is that there are a number of reasons to believe that this parallel private system, it won't be a perfect fix. Right? I mean, first of all, without the government's recommendations, there's no formal guarantee that health plans will cover every shot. Secondly, if different groups put out conflicting recommendations, that could cause confusion. And thirdly, different states could enact different policies depending on whether they follow the White House's lead or someone else's. So also, unless they take immediate action, some may not even have a choice. Because as it turns out, nearly 600 statutes and regulations across 49 states, 3 territories, and DC reference the CDC's advisory panel, meaning that if the panel's recommendations change, then many of these states' policies will automatically follow suit per the statutes. So in effect, an otherwise liberal, democratic, science-loving state government, it could end up doing RFK's bidding by default. The types of the policies that'll be affected, they're very wide-ranging, with them dictating school immunization requirements, mandatory insurance coverage, mandatory vaccination for healthcare workers, notifications about recommended or overdue vaccines, and vaccine purchases, among a number of other things. Plus, a lot of states tie the legal authority that pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, and other healthcare providers have to administer vaccines to the panel's recommendations, meaning that if RFK stops recommending a particular shot, it'll be illegal for those professionals to give you that vaccine. All of that as the Vaccine Integrity Project is preparing for, because you have major pharmacy associations reportedly crafting draft emergency orders that governors could issue allowing pharmacists to continue administering certain vaccines if the federal guidance were to change. With another report saying that some states are also considering forming their own vaccine advisory groups. And you've got officials from Maine, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New York reportedly discussing a regional group for northeastern states. But of course, with all that, the future is hard to predict, and you have some thinking that if vaccines become less accessible and more expensive, then Trump will suffer a political backlash. And there, I'll say, we are seeing some nervousness from a key Republican senator, Bill Cassidy. You see, because Cassidy, he's the chair of the Health Committee who agreed to support Kennedy's confirmation as health secretary only after obtaining a promise that RFK would not touch vaccines.
Now, Mr. Kennedy and the administration reached out seeking to reassure me regarding their commitment to protecting the public health benefit of vaccination. It confirmed he will maintain the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices recommendations without changes.
But now, with this week's CDC panel meeting coming up, he's apparently getting cold feet, with him writing on X. Although the appointees to the panel have scientific credentials, many do not have significant experience studying microbiology, epidemiology, or immunology. In particular, some lack experience studying new technologies such as mRNA vaccines and may even have a preconceived bias against them. Adding, Wednesday's meeting should not proceed with a relatively small panel and no CDC director in place to approve the panel's recommendations, saying the meeting should be delayed until the panel is fully staffed with more robust and balanced representation as required by law, including those with more direct relevant expertise. Otherwise, the panel's recommendations could be viewed with skepticism, which will work against the success of this administration's efforts. Right, so that last line, it seems to be some sort of appeal like, hey, this could make Trump look bad. For now, we're gonna have to wait to see what happens. The meeting, it starts tomorrow, so if it's gonna get delayed, it's gonna happen now. But in the meantime, I gotta ask, what are your thoughts, feelings, and reactions to this news? But then, switching gears from that as we begin to wind down today's show, I want to talk about a different kind of news. Something, dare I say, might even give people some hope, right? And that because the American Diabetes Association just had their annual meeting, and during that, a study was presented that may hold the cure to type 1 diabetes. But also, in order to actually understand how the potential cure works, first you have to understand how the problem works. Because there are roughly 2 million Americans with type 1 diabetes, which is what happens when the immune system destroys islet cells, a subset of which secrete insulin, and without insulin, glucose can't enter cells. And so patients with type 1 diabetes, they have to inject carefully calibrated doses of insulin into themselves in order to compensate for the lack of natural production, which a key thing here is a constant and often expensive process. And that is where this study comes into play, and it's centered around an experimental treatment made by Vertex Pharmaceuticals of Boston. And this treatment, it involves stem cells that scientists have turned into pancreatic islet cells, and then those cells, they're infused into the body, and bada bing, bada boom, they take up residence and do their thing. With the lead author of the study explaining, in the liver, they're sensing a patient's blood glucose level, and they're secreting the appropriate hormone. Then saying that the replacement cells appear to be sensing the changes within seconds or milliseconds, and adding, essentially, it's the same as your native islet islet cells would function. Now, the study specifically, it focused on patients with a complication to their diabetes called hypoglycemic unawareness, meaning that they don't get the same signs that their glucose is dropping that most people do, like shakiness or sweating. And without those signs, these people, they don't know their glucose levels are dangerously low, and so they could suddenly pass out, have a seizure, or even just die. But what makes this story special is that of the dozen participants in the study, 10 of them no longer need to inject insulin at all. Right? They appear to have been cured after a single infusion. Though of course, right, this is not an immediate cure. Participants received the infusion at least a year ago. But within a few months of doing so, patients in the study began to need less and less insulin, and most, they stopped needing it altogether after 6 months. And their episodes of hypoglycemia, they went away within the first 90 days. And you've got doctors just marveling at the results, like Dr. Mark Anderson saying it's trailblazing work, being free of insulin is life-changing. Dr. Peter Sr. adding, I think the data is just so very exciting, so very, very powerful, saying the primary objective of the study was just to show that the blood sugars were better and that people were not having severe hypoglycemia. They blew past that. 10 of the 12 people are off insulin. And one of those 10 is a 36-year-old nurse and mother from Ontario named Amanda. And she explained to a local outlet that when she got her diagnosis of late onset juvenile diabetes at 25, she knew the risks were diabetic coma or worse. Even saying, I took it as a death sentence. I knew eventually, like, the end is always some sort of complication with diabetes. But this treatment, it has totally changed that for her, with Amanda saying, I get emotional because I'm free from those handcuffs. I don't have that looming over me every day. Now with that, as there often are, there are a couple of caveats I need to point out here. But definitely the big one being the trade-off of this treatment. Because yes, patients may not have to inject insulin or worry about their glucose levels at all times, but they will need to stay on an immunosuppressant indefinitely to prevent the immune system from destroying the new cells. And those immunosuppressants, they come with their own dangers, including an increased risk of infection and, in the long term, an increased risk of cancer. With one diabetes expert explaining, the argument is this immunosuppression is not as dangerous as what we typically use for kidneys, hearts, and lungs. But we won't know that definitely for many years. Also, I will say some have squinted at this situation because not everyone made it to the other side of the experimental treatment. Right in that, because the first patient to receive an infusion, Brian Shelton, died shortly after receiving the treatment. Though notably, there you had Vertex saying that the infusion did cure him and that his death was actually caused by dementia symptoms that began before his treatment. Right? And so ultimately, we're at the situation where we're in the beginning. It looks very promising. There are still a lot of unanswered questions, and hopefully we will get answers as this is tested more and more. But just without a doubt, this appears to be a massive step forward, just a culmination of more than 2 decades worth of work and tens of millions of dollars in research. But that, my friend, brings us to the end of today's show. Thank you for watching, thank you for subscribing, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow, because of course I got a brand new show for you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Love you, mean it, bye.